In this video series, I want to introduce you to the Python language. Python is a scripting language used extensively to create a number of hacking tools. Now, in this particular video, I want to show you the installation of the Python language on a Windows machine. Primarily in this video series, we'll be using Kali Linux as the base system to use Python on. But for this video, I want to show you that we can install Python on a Windows machine as well. To do that, we want to go to a browser on our Windows machine. Now, Kali Linux is running on a Windows 10 machine here, so it's very easy for me to open up a web browser and search for the Python language. So let's do that now by going to a browser and then opening up the Python installation file and walking you through the actual installation of Python on this Windows machine. So the first step is to open up a browser window and let's do a search for the Python language. To do that, we simply type in Python and let's do a search for Python Windows, which then shows us the website where there are a number of Python releases for Windows. You'll notice here there are two releases. There's a Python 2.7.11 and there's a Python 3.5.1. What we'll be doing in this particular video series is using the Python 2.7.11 as this is a more stable release and it's more widely used right now. So let's go in and find the installation file for my Windows machine. Now I'm running Windows 10. I need a Windows 64-bit version. So let me go down to find that particular version so we can get that working on this particular machine. And then I'll show you some simple commands and how we can install Python. So I clicked on the 2.7.11 link. If I scroll down, you will see there is a 64-bit version installer here. And that's the one I need to click on. If I click on that, that will then allow me to save the file. Once that file has been saved, I can then install the Python on my Windows machine. So let's go ahead and open that up. Follow the prompts to install Python. Yes, install for all users. I'll hit next here. And let's walk through the actual process of installing this. Now Python might take a few minutes to actually install. It'll give us some options here to select the destination directory. I will leave it as that particular directory. Here I have a number of options to select what I want to include, what I don't want to include. What I'm going to do here is where it says add Python exe to path, I want the Python to be available in the global path variable, so I can select Python wherever I am in my command prompt. Doesn't matter what directory I'm in, I need to select that and make sure that's available to me so I don't have to go to a specific directory to run Python. So let's click next and make sure that it is available in all directories so I can create a program pretty much anywhere and within any prompt that I am on my Windows machine. So this may take a few minutes. Let's wait and wait for this installation to complete, and then I'll guide you through on how we can get Python to run on your Windows machine. Again, depending on your processor speed, this may take a few minutes. And normally it's fairly quick. Here we go with the installation. It's copying the new files and it will be available shortly. And then we can go to a command prompt and test out if Python is actually working. So let's wait a couple more minutes and then we'll open up a command prompt to make sure Python actually works. So it's doing a little bit of installation. There's no errors, so it seems to be working fine. And that has been done. So I click on finish. I go back to my Windows dashboard and open up a command prompt. So let's do that. And now I simply need to type in Python if I type in Python, that should basically cause the program to find Python and then give me this command prompt. So now we see it's 2.7.11, which is the release that we just installed. There are a number of options here. You can get help and things like that for more information. But for now, I simply want to do a simple command, and let's print a phrase onto the screen. Let's type in hello world. So print open quotes, and we type in hello world, and that will simply print hello world to the screen and showing us that Python is actually working. There we go. It has printed hello world to the screen. So this video is just about the installation on a Windows machine. Now, if to exit this, I type in exit with a couple open and close brackets, and that will exit the Python system. So that's how you create it. If I was to create a program in Python, I would open it up in a text editor, a simple notepad or text file editor, and create my program with the .py extension. And then you run it like this, Python program.py, and that will run the commands in that particular program so that Python understands it and the program actually works. So this quick video is about Windows. We'll move on to Kali Linux next. Now let's look at how we install Python on a Linux machine. Now in this particular situation, we're using Kali Linux, and we'll be using Kali Linux for all the tutorials for this particular video series. So to do the installation of Python, the first thing we want to do is type in apt-get install Python, and let's see, already it says that Python is already the newest version. So I didn't have to install it. Kali Linux comes with Python installed already. Now let's look at what version of Python is on this machine. Sorry, I'll type in Python again. And let's see, this version is 2.7.9. It appears it's the latest version that we are using. So let's exit that. Now, just a bit of a disclaimer. Python 2.7.9 is the version we'll be using. We'll be using this to create a number of hacking tools. We'll be looking at how hackers use these tools to basically infiltrate networks, how to infiltrate websites, how to infiltrate other systems. And in most cases, these are undetected because you have complete control of creating the program from scratch or using pre-built modules. I do not advocate you using this for any illegal purposes. This is not the purpose of this particular training. It's to give you an insight into what Python can be used for and how hackers use these tools and how they create their own tools to basically go under the radar of most antivirus systems, intrusion detection systems, law enforcement agencies, etc. So with that, let's go on and show you the number of modules already available within Python that users could simply download and install. The key thing here is we do not want to advocate any illegal activity. This course is primarily set as an information and explanation program to show you what is actually possible. So let's go into a browser window so I can show you the number of modules, and literally there are thousands of modules already available, so you wouldn't even have to write a lot of the code to start with. You could use pre-built modules to make your life easier in the beginning while you learn Python side by side. So the key thing is to understand that modules are already written and all available for free, thousands of them. You could simply use those modules, and I'll show you now how we can actually install those modules on our Kali Linux machine so you can actually get set up with some of those modules already available. To do that, we want to go to our Iceweasel browser and we want to search for a specific website which has the list of modules already available. A simple search on the search engine will retrieve an index of all these modules. So let's go into Iceweasel, and we want to type in something called PyPy, P-Y-P-I, which is the Python package index. So let's close this, type in PyPy to then give us the option of all the modules available to us. So PyPI will give us this link, pypy.python.org, and here we have the Python package index. As you'll see here, there are literally thousands of modules already available. A whole range of things, algorithms, finding images on the website. These are all the newest versions. There are a list of packages that we can see here. If I click on this link, it'll open up a new page and show me the list of 75,432 packages as of this date. So the index will then give me a list of a range of modules already pre-built that we could simply use for our own benefit without having to write a single line of code. So as you can see, as I scroll through here, these are all the packages or modules already available for us to utilize. And I'll show you in a short while how we can actually get these modules working in our Linux version under Python. So let's just do that by looking through some of these. You'll see there's a whole range. Printers, there's things that allow you to 3-letter word games. I mean, literally convert your files to MP3, convert your files into MP4. If you scroll down, there's another one here which actually allows you to convert the 3 to 2. So any programs that I've written in version 3 of Python, you can convert it easily into valid code by using this program, which will then convert all the Python 3 code into Python 2. So again, there's so much. There's HTML parsers, there's accounting tools, there's literally, anything you can think of has already been done. So let's go on to see how we can actually load up some of these packages in our Python version on our Kali Linux machine. But do spend some time looking through the modules that are available. Here's the advanced HTML parser that I talked about earlier. But let's go to Kali Linux, the command prompt in Kali Linux, and let's type in the command pip install, and let's look at the Google module for now, and that's downloading and unpacking the Google module. You'll see it's collected a package called Google and then successfully installed that Google package. So to install any modules, you simply need to type in pip install and then the actual module name that you require. Now, Python is very efficient and really useful to create a number of hacking tools. We'll be looking at some network scanner tools, some cryptography tools, and a whole range of other tools that are already available, and we'll be creating some tools that we'll be able to use for ourselves. And remember, by writing up some code for yourself, you actually are able to create tools that are pretty much undetectable to most intrusion detection systems, antivirus tools, and please use this for legal purposes only and nothing illegal. There are a number of text editors we can use to create our Python programs, but for this tutorial series, we'll be using something called PyCharm, which is a debugger tool, editor tool that has a number of cool features. So let's go in and do a search for the program called PyCharm, PyCharm, and that will find the PyCharm program. There is a community version which is free that you can actually install on your machine. So we go to the download link and let's go and download the community version for now. This will give us some debugging tools already inbuilt into the PyCharm editor. I'll let this install, and then in the next videos we'll show how we use PyCharm to create our own Python programs. So now that PyCharm is almost downloaded, we will wait for it to download and then show you how to install PyCharm on your computer. Now remember, PyCharm gives you a very cool graphical interface that allows you to maintain your code in a much better way. It's got an inbuilt debugger, so pinpoints errors very quickly, and you can see the indentation and formatting is all handled by PyCharm. So let's just wait for the program to download completely, and then I'll guide you through how to install this step by step. We'll be installing this on our Kali Linux machine. So remember, everything we do in this video tutorial series will be done in Linux. I showed you how to do it in Windows, installing Python in the first video, but now we want to move on to how to work with this in Linux. Now let's double click on the actual file and you'll see that it has downloaded. And how do we actually work with this in Linux? What you need to do is actually go to all the downloads. Let's go to the file menu so we can actually see where the file is. And if I go to the Linux command, I want to go to the root directory. So let me go to root, and then I won't go to downloads now. I need to go to root first and then go to downloads. So cd root, and from there I can go to cd/downloads, and you will see that in this folder, if I list the directory, you will see a file called PyCharm community, and it is here in the list right there. So if I copy that file, I need to unzip or uncompress this file. So tar minus zxvf. The X is for extraction, Z is for the file name because it's got a GZ extension, V is to show the output, and F is the file name. And I want to copy this file name and paste it in here. So I type in that particular file name, and that will unzip all the files, as you can see here. And once that's done, we will do another directory listing, and we will see exactly that it has created another folder. As you can see here, there's a folder created here. I copy that, and I want to go into that particular directory. So let's go in, copy that, and cd to that directory. Let's list the files in here, and let's look at what's here. We have a number of files in here that will allow us to use the PyCharm program. So I'll go to the bin directory for now, and we want to change some permissions of this particular file, the pycharm.sh file. So notice that it has some permissions here, but we want to give it the permission of execution. So +X, and put in the file name pycharm.sh. That allows execution of this particular file. So now once that's done, I can execute this file with the command /pycharm.sh. That will allow us to run this particular program, and you'll see now the program will open. And here we are. We here see the screen, which is the login screen, the welcome screen, and then PyCharm will open. It will take a few moments. It does take a little while on the first installation, first loading up of the program. You will see that it is initializing. It may take a short while depending on your program speed. So let's just close this. We don't want the tips of the day. And notice that it's still scanning files to index. So I'll let that do that. It's indexing something. I'll let that run, being the first time it's actually opened. I believe it only does this on the first time you load the program. But once that's working, here we are. So let's go into File, and we could create New, and let's create Python file, and let's call this hello. And once we do that, we hit OK, and this opens up the hello.py file. And here we can type in some simple commands like, let me show you. When I type in print, notice it gives me some options here of some of the functions I could use. And I'm going to simply print hello world in this particular program. Notice how the colors change. This is all because we're using PyCharm. It allows you to maintain your code in a much better way. So hello world in inverted commas, and that's basically it. So if I have this file saved, so let's save as, and once I've had this file saved, I can go into the save as again. Let's save this file, and it's going to be in this folder called hello world. Just want to know that path name. So okay, the file already exists. So let's go back to the actual command prompt, and I want to run that particular file. So let's go into that particular directory. So let's go back to the root folder, and from root we want to go to PyCharm projects, and within PyCharm projects we'll see that there is hello world directory. Here's the hello.py, sub python, and then the file name hello.py prints on the screen hello world. So the command to run the program in Python is to type in Python and then the actual file name. So in this quick video, we've shown how to use PyCharm. We've been able to create a simple program in PyCharm, and in the next videos, we'll continue building more complicated applications. We've created our first program in Python, but now we want to go on and let's look at how to import a module into Python. To do that, we need to go back to the command line, and we are going to use the command pip. So we type in pip and then install. I'm going to show you something that may throw an error, but let's just see if this does or doesn't throw an error. So pip install, and let's look at importing the module nmap. Now, once we type that in, you'll see that it then goes on to see whether it can find the nmap module. It looks like it's downloading and unpacking, but let's see if it does do that or actually throws an error. In this case, I have a feeling it might throw an error because of the actual name. So as you can see here, could not find the particular program or module called nmap. So let's go to the actual list of all the modules available. And when we go to that list, we will do a search for nmap, and let's see what the actual name is. I'll just close this down, and you'll see the list shortly, and I'll do a search for nmap and see what turns up. I have a feeling there are quite a few different modules with the nmap name in it. So let's just do a quick search. As you can see, there's this particular module here. This is not the one we're looking for. So let's continue. There's another one. No, not this one either. It has the Python name in it. So let's just keep going. I just want to show you that you might find a number of modules that look quite similar or maybe similar to what you're after, but the specific one would have its own name, and you'd need to have more keyword tags to find that particular module. So it's not this one either, and I'll just keep searching a little bit more, and we should find it shortly. As you see, there are quite a few different modules with Python. Here we are. So Python nmap, this is the one that I'm after. So if I go back to the command line, I can type in pip install Python nmap. So let's put the word Python in front of this, and with the hyphen, and as you'll see, this has now installed the Python-nmap. I also want to show you another way of how to install this particular module. So let's go back to that list of modules. So you can actually click on this and download it from here. If I click on this, I can click the download button and save that file. You'll see that it has saved here. So what we need to do is then go to the command line and go to that particular directory to find the file. So we go to cd/root and then to cd downloads, and we find that particular file, and you see it's just listed here. Now we use the tar command. So type in tar minus zxvf as we used previously, and the file name, and this unzips or decompresses the file. Then I go to that folder, and all I need to do here is to type in python setup.py and then install. So what we did previously with the pip command, if you don't have the pip functionality, you can use this functionality to do very much the same thing, and it has installed the nmap module as well this way. Now that we have that installed, we can actually go into our program of writing our Python program. So let's go in here and let's do a couple things. One which would be import. So we type in import and then we type in the name of the actual module. So it has this keyword recognition option, so it gives you some options to select from. So type in import nmap. We will leave the print hello world as is, but let's go in and initialize nmap into our Python program. To do that, we type in nmap1 equals, and we type in nmap, and let's look at what are the options available within nmap. So this will give us a list, and let's select port scanner, and that means we have initialized the nmap port scanner. Now we also want to type in nmap, and let's look at version. So let's get the version for this particular instance and see whether it displays that. And now let's go back to our command line and run this program, and let's see whether it does show us the version of nmap. So let's go in here and type in Python, and the file is called hello.py. Notice it only tells us hello world, which means that we need to declare this as a variable. So a equals nmap1.nmap version, and let's print variable a. Now this will show us the version of nmap. So as you'll see, it does hello world and then shows us the numbers 6 and 49. To confirm that, we can actually go in and look at the actual version of this particular nmap. So let's go in nmap-v, which gives us the version, and as you'll see here, it tells us that it's 6.49 beta. So it has shown us the proper values as per the version. So in this way, we are able to create a small program by importing nmap. Then we've declared the variables, and we've also been able to initialize the nmap. Then we've put it into a variable, and then we've been able to print that variable to show us the version. Now let's type in nmap1 dot, and let's see what else we can choose from. As you can see, there are many functions here. In this program, we will basically leave it here, but as you can see, there are so many options available, which we will then cover in future videos to create a very advanced port scanner and nmap tool. We will also go into more detail with all the different nmap parameters, so you will understand those parameters even better. Before we start making some complex programs in Python, I want to explain the concept of indentation in Python. Now, unlike other programs, indentation is absolutely critical in Python. It determines how the code is grouped together, and as you'll see in some examples now, the importance of indentation affects the way the program actually runs. So let's look at a simple example of using a for loop. Now, indentation in other programs is not as necessary as it is in Python, but you'll see shortly how important and how the whole program changes when we use indentation and when we don't use indentation, using very much the same commands. So let's use that for loop as I mentioned. So let's say for x, let's use the variable x, and let's look at the values from say 1 to 10. So for x in, and let's put in the range of 0 to 10. As you'll see, there are three options here. There's a start, stop, and there's step. For now, we'll just use the start and stop. So let's start at 0 and let's go to 10. And let's look at how this program will actually run now, and hopefully it'll show a count from 0 to 10. Now let's look at the formatting. When I hit the enter key, it's showing me the cursor at this particular point. If I then start typing at the beginning of the line, it means that it is a separate command which is outside the for loop. I have to include it at this point if I want to include it at within that for loop. So if I want to print x, and let's put in the variable x, sorry. So print x in brackets, and let's try running that program now. Let's look at the results. Now we have included print x within that for loop. So let's go in and clear, and let's do the, okay, there is an error here. There's a syntax error. Let's look at where the error has occurred, and I can see it straight away. Next to the bracket next to 10, there is a little red marking. If I hover over there, it will tell me it is expecting a colon. So in Python, I need to put a colon at the end of this line. So let's put that colon in, and now the code looks better. Let's run that program again, and let's look at the results. So Python hello.py, notice it now runs the first part of the program as it did before, and then 0 to 9. So as you can see, the for loop with the indentation of the print x works. If I did it this way, now print is outside the for loop. And let's look at what happens when we run the program this time. It tells me indent expected. So this program is actually giving us a warning that they are expecting an indentation at this point. Now I'm going to ignore that warning, and let's just show what happens when we run the program again. Notice it says here indentation error, expected an indented block. So it's telling us that the x was not recognized because it was outside the for loop. Now we need to indent that to make sure that it is in that particular loop. Otherwise, it will throw an error. As I said, in Python, it is imperative that you use the indentation well, because it will determine how the program groups the code together. If we wanted to take the indentation a bit further, we can actually define another for loop within this first for loop. And to do that, we simply use the indentation, and in this case it's a double indentation, so we will use the variable y, and let's see whether we can actually do a double count. So to do that, we need to have a variable y, and let's look at also setting a range for that. So for y in range, and let's look at 0 to 10 again. It's throwing that error on the right hand side because it's expecting that colon, as you can see. So I need to go to the Notice that the line is now again slightly inwards. So it's expecting the indentation. And let's go in and type in at this point print y. And let's look at whether that will actually work. And I'll put y in brackets, so it'll print the variable y. Now I just want to change these values slightly because I don't want it to go right down the page. So let's go 0 to 2 and let's look at y from 4 to 6. That will be neater, so it'll count x from 1 to 2 and then the variable y will count accordingly. So as you can see, it's got 0, 4, 5 and then 1, 4, 5. So what it's done is counted the for loop for x and then it's done a couple for y as well. And that's how you use the double indentation for Python, and this gives you the ability to manage your code in a better way. And as it is imperative for Python to recognize which code is grouped together, this is very handy. To quickly recap what we have done so far, we've looked at how we've installed the module. We've also looked at how we can import a module into our program. We've then also looked at how we can print something out on the screen using the print command within the program. We've also looked at how we can use variables within our Python program. We've also looked at how we can assign a value, a return value to that variable. We've also looked at how important and critical it is to have the proper indentation so that the program works fine and well. And now we want to also look at how we use commenting. To use commenting in your code, you need to use the hash character. This allows you to write sections of the code which is more user readable versus program readable. The program will not execute anything after the hash command because that's more for the user to read and understand exactly why the code was done in that way. So remember to use the hash character to add. As I mentioned, everything after the hash character is classified as a comment. Let's have a look at, there seems to be some error, too many blank lines, so let me correct those blank lines. Let's move this up a little bit and let's fix up everything after the hash is going to be a comment. So let's type in, this is how you can comment your code. And once that's done, that will be classified as a comment. Now there's another way you can actually do commenting as well. So let's do something like height equals 12. And if you need someone to read the code later on and define exactly what height actually is it meters, kilometers, is it centimeters, you can put a hash character here. And in this case, we'll call it meters. So hash meters, which will then indicate to someone reading the code that this is a comment and the value will be in meters. So that's how you do basic commenting. Now what we've done here is basically given height equals 12. That's an integer variable because we don't have any quotes or single quotes, double quotes, etc. When using Python, if we just define it as a number, Python treats it as an integer variable. If I was going to do a string variable, I could do it like this. So I go to the next line and let's type in something like username. Let's give a value to the variable username, and in this instance we use the double quotes. So simply type in username equals, and then within double quotes we give a value, for example test1. So open double quotes and close double quotes, and within those quotes we put in test1. This is now classified as a string variable. If I wanted to define a path for a specific file name, I could also use quotes, but in that instance, I use single quotes. To do that, I simply type in file name equals, and I will use single quotes this time. So file name equals single quotes, and within those single quotes, I type in, for example, abc / abc.txt, which is a reference to a file within a directory called abc. So this is how we use integer variables, string variables, and path name variables. Just remember, path names will be in single quotes. In Python, it is also very easy for you to define floating point numbers. You simply need to give or choose a variable, use the equals to sign, and simply type in the floating point number. So I can do b equals, and in this case, I will put 1.2, which is now a floating point number. We can also use Boolean expressions. So for a Boolean, I can do c equals true, and that's a Boolean expression. I can also do d equals false, and that's another Boolean expression. We can also do mathematical calculations in Python, and to do that we can simply type in, for example, two values or two variables, y and z. Let's look at y equals, and let's look at 2 multiplied by 2, and let's also look at z as another variable, and let's put z equals 2 plus 2. Just put some spaces here. Now to print this out, I can print, and let's put in y, and let's also print z. And once we do that, we can actually run this program in our Kali Linux environment. Save this file, and let's print this again, and let's have a look. And you notice here at the bottom it shows 4 and 4, which is 2 times 2 and 2 plus 2. So let's look at what else we can do in Python. Now let's look at whether we can add two variables together. So let's look at how we do that. So we can type in here, let's print the value of x plus y. And let's run this and see how that appears. If I print this, it should get, oh, it's giving us 5. I know the error. I've used x. X is from further up, which was a value of 1. So I need to change this. It's z plus y. Now if we run this again, we should get the value of 8. Let's go back to the Linux environment and let's run the program again. And now we should see the value appear as 8. There we go. We see 4, 4, and 8 as the sum of y and z. So this is how we use the mathematical functions in Python. As you can see, if we change any of the mathematical operators from the multiplication and plus to subtraction and division, when we print the y and z, that will be reported with the correct answer. So the other benefit of Python is that it is extremely lightweight. It works under the Linux environment, works under Windows, works on Mac, even works on Android. So Python is actually becoming a very popular tool for hacking professionals and hackers because it works on multiple environments. The other beauty of Python is that you don't need complex strings and variable definitions. As you noticed in this particular program, we very simply were able to give numerical values, string values, path name value simply by using double quotes and quotes, or not having quotes at all, just having a number. We've been able to use Boolean expressions very easily. What's also really handy is that Python allows you to use simple indentation rules to make the code work extremely well. So given all these benefits and ease of writing the code, where you don't have to worry about all the fancy definitions like defining a variable, defining strings, defining integers, we are now able to create very simple programs. That's why Python is an extremely useful tool for hackers to create simple applications like exploitation tools, network scanning tools, keyloggers, all these other different variations, because they also have so many programs already available that are completely free for a user to start creating their own custom Python program. So given that it works on Mac and works on Android and works on Linux as well as PCs, you can see how dangerous it can be in the wrong hands. There's some simple code would allow a user to install this on any particular machine of their choice, get complete access to a victim's computer, and then be able to take advantage of that machine, whether it be a keylogger, a virus, or a Trojan. Python is also being used by many of the large corporations because of the ease of use and because of all the custom programs already available for free that can be simply modified for each person's personal use. As I mentioned earlier, given that Python has such a wide collection of programs already available for free, it is being used by hackers for tools like network analysis, network scanning, Wi-Fi scanning, debugging purposes, even things like encrypting and decrypting. We're also using it for malware analysis and forensic analysis. There's many uses for Python because of the wide range of platforms it can be used for, like Linux, Android, Mac, and even PC. Now, before I finish this video, I want to show you a couple additional commands, and the one that we want to look at is the length command. So to do that, we have the PyCharm open, and if you do get a chance to purchase the paid version of PyCharm, it is highly recommended. Free version is great, but the paid version does have some additional features and benefits. Let's look at how we can grab the actual length of the username. To do that, we can simply type in len username, and at the beginning of this statement, I'm going to put in print to print the length of that username, which should give us a value of 5. Now let's go back into Kali Linux and run the program to show the value of 5. Run the program, and as we'll see, it's thrown an error, and the reason is print is in capitals here. I need to correct that by using lowercase p. Now let's run that again, and as we can see, the value returned is 5. There are other additional commands that we can use with these string variables, and one of them that I'm going to do now is print, and we're going to do some functions on the actual username. So to do that, I type in print, and let's type in username, and this time I'm going to put a full stop next to username, and as you can see here, it has a number of options that we can perform tasks on that particular username. For example, I'll use capitalize here, and let's see if it does return the value as capitals. So when I run this program, it hasn't, and I know what it is. I fixed it now, and the reason is it's because I used the wrong command. This should be called upper. So instead of capitalize, I use upper, and that takes the test1 username and puts it all in capitals. So all the letters become capitals, the number stays exactly the same. Now we can do some additional things like if username, and if you notice here, there's a count, there's is digit, is lower, is space, is title, is upper. there's many things that we can do to test that particular username. So let's use isDigit to see whether we can find if the username returns a value of true or false given the nature of the username. So let's type in username.isDigit, and in this situation I'm going to change the username just to have a value of 1, just to prove that it is true when I run this program. So let's go in and run this program, and then I'll show you where it's a false condition. Here the result is true. Now let me change the value of this to test1 again, and in this instance when I run the program it should show the value of false. As we can see, the value is now false because it has letters in the actual username. So with this we can actually see that there are a number of options that are available in Python, and lots of options to test and play around with different calculations, different mathematical operations, and extremely easy to use. And that is why it is a very popular tool amongst hackers. This PyCharm application makes it very easy for you to see how the code looks and gives you all the different color options to make it a very easy way for anyone to start coding in Python. Let's now look at some conditional statements, and in this particular case I'm going to look at A and B. We're going to look at if statements, else statements, while statements, else if statements. For our simple example now, we're going to use if A is less than B. So I simply type in if A less than B, and now let's look at where A and B have been defined. If I go up in the code, A was used in the nmap, so I need to define it again. So let me go just above B, and let's call A equals 1. Sorry, A should be 1, B is 1.2. Now let's do some definitions. I need to put a colon here, which then allows me to enter the next line with the indentation. I want to print, and this is what I want to print: A is less than B. So if A is less than B, print this. And to see the other condition, I type in else, because if B is greater than A, I need to print B is greater than A. Let me just make sure that is correct. It's actually not right. I need to type in B is less than A. Sorry for the confusion, just trying to work through the logic myself. So let's now look at whether the calculation is correct. Run the program, and we see A is less than B because A is equal to 1. If I change the value of A, let's make A 1.4, and we run the program this time, we should get a different answer where B is less than A. Another handy feature using something like PyCharm is that when I make changes to the code is automatically saved, so I don't need to then have to save the file again. Other handy feature is if you go to the top section where it says run, I can run the program while within PyCharm. So if I hit the run button, you'll notice at the bottom it'll ask me which program. I select hello, which is the name of our current file, and when I do that, the bottom section shows up the output as we would have had in our Linux environment that we've been testing. So it's another handy feature that you don't need to keep going back to Linux or your environment like PC or Mac to test the code when you can do it right here. We can also run the code with this play button on the left hand side, and that will do the same as testing the application from within PyCharm. Now let's look at what we can do in this if statement by adding a command called else if. So after it says print A is less than B, let's type in else if, and else if is written as ELIF in Python. And the condition now should state if A is less than B, print A is less than B. Else if A equals B, then we want to print A is equal to B. I'll fix up the syntax in a second, but print A is equal to B. Let me go up and change the value of A to 1.2 to make this consistent with them being equal. And I need to put a colon here after else if. And what I've forgotten to do is the A equals B needs to be next to else if. So let's go to the next line and change that. Else if A equals B, colon, and what I really need to do is this equals sign needs to be a double equals. So A equals B, then print A is equal to B. Now if I run the code in Kali Linux, let's make sure this actually works. And there we see A is equal to B. This is how we use the code in Python. You need the double equals to sign, and the else if is written as ELIF. You want to make sure you use your colons and indentation properly, otherwise your code may not work and will throw an error. So in this case, we've got if A is less than B, do this. Else if A equals B, print A is equal to B. And if those two conditions are not met, then print B is less than A. There's other statements like less than, equal to, greater than equal to, and to use not equal to, we use the exclamation mark and then we use the equals to command. So not equal to, exclamation mark, equals is the command for that particular expression. Let's look at another example where we type in if A is less than B and B is greater than C. So we use and B greater than C. And let's print the statement on the screen, hurrah. So if A is less than B and B is greater than C, colon, print, and we're going to type in print hurrah to make sure that A is less than B and B is greater than C only under those two conditions. So let's look at what the value of A is and what the value of B and C is. A is 1.2. So let's make A less than B, and we want B to be less than C. So let's, C less than B, so B is greater than C. Now let's double check the output for that. 1.1, 1.4, and 1.3 for the three values. And you see it prints hurrah here. This is how we test for a double condition in an if statement. If I change and to or, and we need to then modify the values, but now it will test for if one of the conditions is true. So let's go and make C greater or B less than C. If B is less than C, the condition on the right is not met, but it still should print hurrah. So when we run this, notice that hurrah appears here. If I again change this to say if A is less than B and B is greater than C, in this case both conditions have to be true. If I click the play button, nothing is displayed because one of the conditions is false. So in this way we are able to use if statements, else if statements, and the else statement. By now you should be familiar with how to use some basic Python expressions. We've looked at how to define integer values, we've looked at how to define strings, we've looked at how to define path names, we've looked at if, we've looked at else if, we've looked at else, we've been able to look at Boolean values, we've looked at string length in a previous video. We've looked at how to compare different values. We've looked at how to add, subtract, multiply. We've been able to print things to a screen. So by now you should have a basic grasp of Python. What I also want to show you in this video is the while loop. Now to do that, basically what we want to do is say if a certain number is this while the program is running, do a certain task. So let's define x equals 1 in this example. And while x equals 1, we then want to print something to the screen, which is print the value of x. So x equals 1. I need to put a colon there, so I'll fix that up in a second. Print x onto the screen. Now let me go and make sure this code is correct. What I'm going to do here though is let x equal 10. And while x equals, I'll do the less than equals 10. So while x, let me just play this. Let me change this to x equals 1. Let's keep it simple. While x equals 1, or x equals to 1, while x is less than or equal to 10, print x. And now we need to increment x after it prints. So x equals x plus 1. So it increments by 1 each time. So it should print 1 through to 10 and not print anything after that, because the while loop will be false at that point. As you can see here, it's printed 1 up to 10. So x equals 1, while x less than equal to 10, print x and then increment x. And this is how we use the while loop. Very interesting and very useful in code, and we'll see how to use these functions in more detail in some future videos. But just get a handle on how we've defined x and then we've incremented it, and while x is less than equal to 10, it prints x. In most programming languages, you have the option of arrays. Arrays are a group of objects that are stored within a particular array. In Python, this is actually called lists. So let's look at how we can actually create a list of objects. One thing to note is that when you have a list of objects, the first position is position 0, and then moving up from to 1 and then 2. So always remember the first object in that particular array or list is numbered 0, and I'll show you how that works now. So let's look at how we can create a simple array. We will create something with a few different objects within that array. Now arrays are used for things later on where we can do some port scanning and to track the host and the different port numbers, etc. And that's why this is an important lesson to see exactly how we can use arrays effectively. Let's now look at a simple example before we move on to some more complex examples. In this example, we are going to use a list of different numbers to start with. So simply define a variable. In this instant, we will use something called list var. So we type in list var equals, and then we want a group of numbers. So equals, we use the square brackets, and then we start with numbers like 1 to 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'll explain exactly how these numbers work shortly and how we can reference them with further functions. So open square brackets and the numbers 1 separated by commas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now that we've got the array or list created, we want to print one number from that list. So we print list var, and then we open brackets and we select the position. So in this instance, we'll use 0, which is the first number in that list. So make sure to remember to use the square brackets around the position number and then normal brackets around the list variable, so that when it prints that particular position. So we have position 0 here. It should find the number 1, as we'll see in the results. As we can see here, it has returned the value 1, which is the first position 0. If I was going to change this to find the last one, for example, the last number, I change that to 5. And if I run this, it now should give us the value 6, which is the last number in that particular list. We can also do an iteration where we can pick some numbers from a range. So let's type in a variable letter, for example. Let's use I for I, and let's look at it being in a range, and let's call it 0, 5, which will then give us all the positions in that list. I need to add a colon at the end of this line to make sure there's no errors. And we want to then print, open brackets, list var, and let's put in the square brackets for the variable I. Now, when I run this, it should give us a list of the values from that particular list. So you'll see 1 through to 5 appear here, which shows that it is working. So in this simple example, we've looked at a list of integers. Now let's look at how we can store a list of strings. To do that, we need to add a few additional things like single quotes. And let's go in and type in a variable name. Let's use list str to store strings, and we'll use just a couple letters, A and B. So list str equals, we still use the square brackets, but what we do with the letters in this instance, we want to put the letters in single quotes. So if we want to store A and B, we just type in A in single quotes, comma, B in single quotes, which then gives us the option of having two basically strings in an array. So A in single quotes, comma, B in single quotes. And then to print that, we need to use the command list string, or list-str, in square brackets, select the position number for that particular value that we want, and we do need to hit the print button or type in print before that. Let's run this program now, and it should give us a result of the letter A and also B in this case. Let's do B. As you can see here, it has found the second position for us. There is another more complex example of arrays in Python, and this time we use a dictionary. So to do that, we can type in list dict in this particular example, and we want to store a list of user IDs against a name, for example. In practice, we could use something like this to store the host computer name and the port numbers or the vulnerabilities found, or we could use it to store usernames and then their user ID or usernames against their real names. So what we need to do though is just to understand the way to write the code. You type in list dict equals, you need to use curly brackets in this instance. So you use curly brackets and then close those curly brackets, and within the actual brackets we need to type in the values, and we have to remember we need key values and the key has to be unique. We'll go through this in more detail in a future lesson. I just want to show you how this works for now so we can actually retrieve some data from a dictionary. So I had made a small error in the actual code, so I just stopped the video and I've restarted it. But as you can see here, I've got list dict, curly brackets open, and then I've got name test1 UID. So in this instance, I've got name in single quotes, colon, and then the actual value for it. And here I've got UID equals 27, just using a colon between that. Then I've got name 2. I'll put that in single quotes again and give that a value with a colon. And let's call this test2. And then I also have to give the UID to a number. And let's call that number 28. Again, put the single quotes around it and a colon with the value 28. Then I've also got in the next line for k, comma v, two variables, list dictionary items, and then print k and v. So basically assigning k and v the dictionary items, the name test1 and UID 27, and then the name test2 with the UID 28. And when I print that, it then prints those values to the screen. So this is how we use a simple dictionary. We'll go into more detailed examples as we will be creating a port scanner using the Nmap module that we had loaded in earlier. So we will actually build a specific port scanner in Python. So you'll exactly see how I'm able to create that port scanner, a simple port scanner with Nmap module in Python. So as you can see, we have learned so far quite a bit in Python, a very brief overview of things like how to define values, how to define variables, how to do mathematical operations, the if statement, the else if, the else statement. We've looked at how to print to the screen. We have looked at for and while loops. We've looked at lists and arrays. And now we'll move on to actually creating our very first port scanner using the Nmap module. Let's look at some simple string manipulation examples. These string manipulation examples will become handy later on when we are using Python for hacking examples. So let's try a simple string strabc, and let's use a simple sentence, simple phrase. It doesn't really matter. And I'll just type in something here. And what we're going to do is actually see how to get the position of certain letters. So let's look at, let me just fix this, this correction here. And now what we want to do is figure out how to grab the first letter in this phrase. So we do strabc equals, and we want position 0. So we do it in this way, strabc 0. We still need to use the print command to print that to the screen. So print, and what it should return is the first letter. And if you see here, it gives us the letter T as the first letter in this string. If I then want to print the first 3 letters in this string, I can do a similar version, but strabc, but now 0 to 3. So it'll give us the first 3 characters. 0:3. And this should give us the result THI when I run this particular program. As you can see, THI, if I wanted to print the word this, I can use it with the number 4, and that would give us the word this, as you can see at the bottom here. Now there's another option you can use here, is if you want to print something backwards, you can use the following expression, which basically prints backwards. So as you can see, if I use the following print command, strabc, and instead of using a number as we had done in the previous two examples, we can use the minus operator. So -4 will give us the last 4 letters, which is news, and give us that result. So let's have a look at the play or running of this application, and as you can see, it gives us news as predicted with this particular expression. So we can also do some additional options here. We can actually read from a file. We can also split up a string. So I'll show you how we can split a string in this next example, which will allow us to take the string that we had above and break it into individual words. So to do that, we will need to use the split command, and we type it in this following manner. We use the strabc, and we use the dot option and then split. So strabc dot split, and then we want to use a space character within quotes. So here we are, strabc dot split, and then we want to include a quotation marks, double quotations with a space in between. And with this, it will give us each word in its own singular quotes and separated by a comma. We can also use the join command, which will allow us to join two strings. So in this example, we'll take two short strings and then look at how we can join them together. So firstly, let's define A equals, and let's use ABC for A, and we put this in single quotes, and B equals, let's use XYZ, also in single quotes. Now to join them, what we do is we want to print, and this time when I open brackets, I'm going to use double quotes with no spacing in between, then a comma, then join, and now I'm going to open brackets again and put in square brackets with the two variables a comma b, close those square brackets. If I play this now, you will see ABC XYZ, which is the combination of variable A and variable B. Another example I want to show you is where we can get user input from the user. So let's go in and see if we can grab an email address for the user. So let's type in email and use this variable to get the user to type in their email details. And what we then want to do is print this to the screen. So we want raw input from the user. So email equals raw input, and let's call this please enter email. Now once we do that, we can then get the user to type in something for the email address, and let's do the print to the screen, which will then allow us to print this to the screen. So as you can see, it's asking me for an email here, but now I also want to print the email to the screen to verify we have captured the email address. Now if I run the program, it should print the email after it asks me to enter an email address. So let us use test@test.com, and as you can see, it has printed the output correctly. So again, raw input from the user will then be printed to the screen in this particular example. Now what I'd like to do is also show you how we can read data from a file. Reading from a file is extremely useful in Python because when we have long lists of data that we want to analyze later, especially when we're using Python for hacking, this will be incredibly useful to see how we can read lines of code from a file. So let's use a variable f equals open, and let's type in, we can use a relative path, which is // which is the same path name as where hello.py is, or we can use the absolute path, by typing in /root/ let's work on a file called abc.txt. And what we want to do is then define a variable. We'll also use the read tag here to make sure it's in read mode. And what we want to do here is for line being a variable, for line in F, what we want to do is then basically print the line. So what we're basically saying is any line in the file, print that line. So let's go in firstly to make sure we have a file at this address. So I'll go to the Kali Linux screen as well, and let's go to that root directory and use nano to edit a file. It looks like I already have an abc.txt file, so let me quit out of this and let me remove this file, and we can start fresh again. So just call it rm, and let's edit this again. And what I'll do here is put in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. Then we'll put A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and let's say this is great. Let's save this file now and go back to the command prompt. We'll use the more option, so more, and let's look at the file contents of the abc.txt file. As you can see here, the text file now contains all this data. Let's go back to Python now, and in Python, if we hit the run button, which will then allow us, it's asking for email address, so let me just type in something here, t@t.com, and let's look at the results. As you can see, it has printed A, B, etc. up to ABC XYZ, and this is great. So it has read the file, and as I said, it will be incredibly useful later on to print out port numbers or IP addresses or vulnerabilities, etc. when we have a long list of data. We want Python to filter out certain bits of information. Very useful, especially in a hacking environment. So with these quick examples, I've shown you how to use strings, manipulate those strings, also to be able to grab user input, and also be able to open a file and then print line by line. As we will move on from this simple example to more complex examples in hacking. Now that we've looked at how to use Python to read a file, and we've also looked at how we can get user input from the console, let's move on to how to use functions in Python. So let's firstly define a function. So I use the command def, and let's call this one something along the lines of employee details. So let's go with employee, and let's put in things like ID and name. So let's put in name, comma, ID. So now we've got a function here for the employee name and the employee ID. We then also do something called employee name and reference the name in the function above. So employee name equals name, and then we do employee ID equals the ID. So here we go with employee name equals and the name in the line above, and then we do employee ID is then equal to the ID listed above. Once that is done, we can then return a value for that particular function, so whether it's true or false. So let's return if the ID is true or false. We can then put in here, let's put in true. Now that we have the employee name and employee ID, we can then return a value of true if a condition is met. To then call the function, what we need to do is enter a new line here that basically says to employee, and let's give it a value. We'll use the username test1 and the ID 123. Given that test1 is a string, we need to put that in quotation marks. So let me just add the quotation marks here to make sure the function runs correctly. When I run this, let's have a look at what happens at the results section. Now, nothing really has happened because I haven't printed anything here. So let me just go to the line before return the value of true, and let's print employee name and employee ID. So let's do that by typing in print employee name, comma, employee ID. Now what should happen is when I print this, let's have a look. It has returned the username and password, username and ID, because I have called the function in the line below, employee test1 and 123. What's then happened is it has added these values to the name and ID in the employee section above. And then what's happened is we have then said employee name equals name and employee ID equals ID. What has happened here is once the values have been added because we've called the function, we then have returned these values in the employee name and employee ID because these values have been passed on. When I then print the employee name and employee ID, it's then returning the values test1 and 123 because those are the values that have been assigned in the arguments above. If I then want to change the print employee name and employee ID, instead I type in return employee name, employee ID. Let me remove this return true. Now when I press the play button, run button, you'll see that nothing happens because it has returned into the employee name and employee ID, but we have not done anything further from there. If we were then going to use that, we could then use it in a function or something later on, but we haven't done so. Let's use another example now, and let's use something with port numbers, something that will be useful in our hacking examples. So let's define a function here called check port range, and I will put in port number here. So basically what we want to check is if a port number is within a specific range. So let's use the number 65635 as an example, and 0 if port num is greater than 65635, and we'll use the OR port num is less than 0, which indicates that it is within the range 0 and 65635. What we then want to do is return a value of false because it is outside the range, or else return the value of true because the port number is within a range. So just tidy this up and return true. All it's saying is if the port number is greater than this number or less than 0, return false, else return true, because it's checking the port number is within a specific range. Now let's assign a value to each of these, and let's put a port number of 80, and then let's put another port number that will be quite high. Let's use one with a few zeros. And now when we run this particular program, what's going to happen is it's going to return true and then false, because we have created this accordingly. Let's just print the port range and port number to the screen, and I'll do that again here with this particular calling of the function. And let's have a look at what happens now. As we can see, the port number 80 is within the range, so it responds as true. And in the second example, the port number is way out of that range, so it returns false. This will be extremely useful when we are checking for port numbers when we are scanning a victim's machine to check which ports are within a specific range, so we can then use this for our hacking purposes. When we have multiple port numbers, we don't want to do this manually. So let's quickly recap exactly what we've been able to do so far. In the last lesson, we looked at how to use functions, how to define those functions, how to print values, how to use those values in functions, how to use if and else statements. We've also looked at, in previous lessons, how to use strings. We've been able to look at how we've been able to open files. We've been able to look at how to print line by line from a file. We've looked at strings and how to split those strings, how to join the strings. We've looked at the for and while statements. We've looked at dictionaries. We looked at strings again. We've also looked at variables, integer variables, etc. We've looked at how to print in a range. We've looked at if, else, and elif statements. We've even looked at how to import a module and how to use that module to do some basic types of testing. Now let's move on to create our very first network scanner. So far, I've only shown you how to import the Nmap utility or module and how to use that in a very simple way. Now we're going to clear this document and then go on to use the Nmap module to build our Nmap network scanner. To do that, the first thing I want to do is clear the code that has been listed here, and let's go on to then still import the Nmap module, but now we will look at how to check certain ports and then report back if those ports are available. So again, I need to import the Nmap utility. I'll just clear a few things here and let's create a new Python file. I will call this file test, and what I want to do is save the previous code in here. When we want to use it later on, it's still there. Go back to the hello.py, and here we have, just for now, import Nmap. Now to use the Nmap network scanner, what I could type is nmap, and let me just see what else we can do very quickly. So nmap for Nmap. What I'm going to do before that is change this to basically say ns. The short version of the Nmap scanner is ns, and what I want to do equals, let's do nmap dot port scanner. So I'm calling this ns equals nmap port scanner, and then I want to put in ns, and then I will put in the nmap version, which I want to then retrieve the nmap version. I can then print this to the screen, and when I run this particular program, it should print the latest nmap release version 6.49, which is the current version. Now we want to go in and type in ns, and let's see what else we have here. We want to do a scan. So let's click on this one here, which is scan self-host, etc. and I will put in the IP address of this particular machine, which is 127.0.0.1, which is as listed here. And then let's pick some ports, and I can use some arguments as well. So let's put in some values here. 127.0.0.1, and I'll put in a comma, and let's put in the port numbers from 1 through to 65535. So put this in quotes because it is a string, comma, 1 to 65535. Let's type that in. So we have those port numbers. Sorry, I just need to fix the 2 to a 3. And let's see if that works. So once that has been done, I can now scan the IP address 127.0.0.1, and these being the ports. So if I run this, basically the Nmap scanner will then scan those specific ports. So let me run this, and let's look at the results, and we will see what the program is doing. It might take a little while because it's checking all these ports. Now while that's happening, let's see, I may need to stop this because obviously there's a lot of ports here. So let's change this to just 1000 ports. So let's just alter that because this is taking quite long. I'll also put in the -v extension here to fit in with that particular settings. So this seems to still be going, again because there are so many ports to scan. So let's stop that, and let's go back in and change this to just be 1000 ports. So let's figure this out, and let's have a look at what the results are when I put this at 1000. When I run this program now, I might take out the -v tag because it's not really required at this point. Let's run the program, and yes, the process is working with 1000 ports scanned. Now we can do the NS scan, and let's change this to the -v tag, and let's look at what results are obtained when we use -v in this scan. So let's run this again, and the process is finished. Hasn't reported anything because we haven't really printed anything to the screen. So let's see what we can do here. I can view the results by typing in ns scan info, and let's have a look at what is returned when we type in ns scan info. I run the program, and you will see the process is finished. I need to probably put in a print command in there. So when I go back here and type in print, notice now when I type in print and run this program, it will return some results like TCP. So it's the service that we're using, services, these are the ports, and the method that it is using for this particular scan. That is returning the scan for those particular ports. Now I want to print the NS CSV. So let's print this and see what happens now. If you look through here, it's returned those certain information that we had before, but now it's telling me host protocol and some other details here, which is no port is open on this particular machine. So that's interesting. I need to find another machine to basically return a result, as this has no ports open. So I have another machine here, and this being the port 192.168.146.1, and let's do a scan for ports 1 to 1024. We'll use the -v extension, and let's run this to make sure. As you can see here, it has reported back that we have some open ports. You'll see the IP address, and it talks about port 53. Then we have port 80, port 135, and we have port 139 and 445. NetBIOS, MSRPC, Microsoft 80 for the web server, and port 53. So as we can see, it has returned some information here, and in a convenient CSV format. If I then wanted to check for more information, if I feel that this is too basic for what I want, I can then use another tag in the scan option to print out more information, which I'll show you shortly. So we've changed the setting from 1 to 1024 to search for those ports, and we can see that it's got open. It tells us that the name of the actual service, like MSRPC, and if I do AOV, and let's run this now, it has thrown an error. Let me just change that to AV, and let's see, we want to try and print all information. As we can see here, it's saying is ambiguous. I need to put version or version all. That's fine. Basically, I need to be more specific with the search option. So I'll just copy this, and I'll go back to this and change this to -v. And what we'll then do is add this -- version all to the end of this line. And let's run the program again to see if that gives us more results. It is running, and let's see if it does give us more results. Sometimes it works and sometimes it won't work. It just depends on the machine you're running it against. If it doesn't return it, as it has not given us any more information, this option will just give you an idea what you can do when you are doing your scans. So for this particular machine, we haven't been able to get more data. It doesn't mean that you won't be able to get data from your scan. So let's look at a couple other options of the Nmap scanner. I'll comment some of these settings out because I want to focus on the next commands. So let's change these ports from port, say, 22 to port 445 to have that range, so we're not running this program for too long. And let's do the NS scan again. This time we'll pick NS all hosts, and let's have a look at the results. It's running, and hope ants that's in the line previously to this line. But let's have a look at the results that we are able to get from this particular scan. When we run it, we should see some information about that particular server, up hosts, and you can see the status is up. So as you can see, this is another way to find out information about the server that we are scanning against. Now, if I want to check out the protocols that we are using on this particular server, I can print this out, but instead of state, I can put in protocols. So let's do that and find out what protocols are running on this server or this IP address, all underscore protocols. And let's run this now and let's see what information is obtained when we do the scan this time. It should tell us up again, but then tell us the protocols that are available on this particular IP address. I'm just waiting for the results to appear. This may take a short period of time depending on your connection, etc. But let's have a look at, we can see now that it shows us the TCP protocol has been found. Now, this is just another way to find more information about the IP address. If I then want to find the ports on that particular IP address, I can print and I will copy the IP address in here. And we print the Nmap scan for this IP address. We want to use the second key as TCP. We also want to then select all the keys. So we type in TCP here. And then we use the option keys to print all the keys for this IP address. And then when I run the program this time, it should give us more information about this particular TCP and the keys. So let's have a look at the results that will appear shortly. And it's scanning between those ports 22 and 445. So as we'll see here, the TCP ports will be visible and it will be up. You'll see the ports open are 80, 445, 139, 53, and 135. So that's showing us all the open ports that are available. If I then wanted to change this and only print out a specific port, or just for the port 80, I do it this way. So I can type in has underscore TCP here. And what I need to do is also take out this other TCP option here. I'll put in TCP has TCP port 80, but then I need to remove this TCP section here. And when I run it this time, it will return the value true. So let's have a look at the syntax now. We've got NS 192.168.146.1, comma, has underscore TCP and port 80. As you can see now, the result at the bottom of the screen says true. So it means that port 80 has been found open on that particular IP address. As you can see, it's listed in the list above. So as you can see, we have created our very first Nmap scanner. You can see that by simply creating a Python file and importing the Nmap module, we have all the options here to check the state, to check the protocols, check the TCP, check for ports 80. Now imagine being able to create a little Python script like this, where you could scan 1,000 or 10,000 IP addresses overnight to check for the port 80 that is open, and then only report back to you which machines has the port 80 open. And this is what hackers do. They are able to create lightweight programs in Python, and you would see this popularized on certain TV shows currently, where they're able to create a Python file and then use this in a lightweight, very simple format to then perform hacking or penetration testing to find vulnerabilities on certain IP addresses, etc. As you can see, this is a very simple example, but hopefully has shown you how you can use Python to create your own Nmap scanner. Now let's move on to create a brute force password cracking program in Python. So the first thing we need to do is create a new file. And what we will then do is we'll need to import some libraries to make sure this program will work correctly. So the first thing we need to do is import the socket library. This socket library will be used for the connection to the FTP socket, etc. So to do that, we type in import socket, and that will give us the socket library imported into Python. Then we also need to import the RE library, which is for regular expressions. And then we need to import one more module or library, which is basically for the storing of passwords. So it's to import the sys library, and this will be for reading the passwords, storing the passwords, manipulating the passwords, etc. So this is the import sys, which will be the systems library. Before we start creating the actual function, here you see the 3 modules that will be required by our program. So the next thing I want to do is define a function called connection. This will be the connection which sends the IP address, the username, and password. So connection is the function name, and within brackets I put IP, comma, user, comma, pass. Now basically this is the function called connection that will then send the IP address or connect to the IP address with a specific user and password. I've just noticed that password is throwing a small error, and that's because password is a reserved word for Python. So what I'll do is just change pass to PASSW to reflect that it is not a reserved word and a parameter that we can use in our program. Now I want to declare something for the socket. So SOCK equals socket dot socket, and within brackets I want to select a parameter for the IPv4 IP addresses and also for the TCP ports. So for that I need to type in socket dot af underscore inet. So let's go in here and type in socket dot af underscore inet. That will be listed in the list below. So let's look that up and make sure the spelling is correct. Yes, af underscore inet will give us the IPv4 IP addresses, and we also need something for TCP ports. So what we do here is we put a comma and then we type in socket dot, and we want to do a socket stream. So to do that we type in socket, and let's look at the options here that will show us for the TCP ports, and you see it says SOCK underscore stream, which will be for the TCP ports. So here we have a declaration for the TCP ports and for finding IPv4 IP addresses. Let's go on to now print a message to the screen. And what we want to do is print something that says which username, which IP address, which password are we trying. So we want to print something in quotes that says trying. And what we then want to report back is what IP address are we trying, what user are we trying, and what password are we trying. So trying, and then we need to put in some of the variables, which will be plus, and we need something for the IP address. So we put in IP, and let's continue and make sure that we have a colon in quotes, so it shows us that it's trying this particular IP address. And then we want to put in the user, and again the colons in quotes, and then we want to select the password as well with this method. So here we have put the quotes, and now we put in password. So what it's basically saying is what we will print to the screen is what IP address, what user, and what password. Then we also want to do the declaration for sock.connect, and what we want to do here is select the port that we want to connect to. So the IP address, and then we want to put in port 21, which is the FTP port. So I'll write it this way: sock.connect and IP.21. Let me add a few more lines here, one being the data that we receive. So data received will be stored in a data variable, and let's have a maximum length of 1024. I'll just change this s equals to sock.receive. Basically what we're saying here is if a connection is made, data is received. Now what we want to do is send a username and password to the connection to make sure we can try and see if we can log in. So to do that, we type in sock.send, and let's put in something that sends the username first. So let's type in user, and then we want to send the user value. So user, and then I'll put in the variable, which was user. And what we then want to do is also add an extension on this to basically allow for the line to end and then to create a new line. So we do that by the /r/n, so end line and then new line. And then we go on to receiving the data again. So we type in data equals sock.receive, again with a maximum length of 1024. And what we then want to do is send the password. So similar to what we did in the sending the user, we want to do the same, but only thing we want to do is sock.send, change that to pass or password, and change this to password here. And we are still receiving data in the data variable. Now let me quickly review the code. And what we now want to do is basically quit that connection. So we do that by sending, so sock send, and we want to send a command called quit, and then we want to close the connection. So to do that, we go to the next line and type in sock.send, and we'll put in quit, which will then allow us to quit that connection, and then we want to close. So let me just fix the spelling here, lowercase q, and then we want to close this particular connection. Also make sure you have the return. R means end of line and N is new line. I've just fixed up the sock.send, and then sock.close to close the connection. Once you have created this little program, we want to return the data. So whatever values have been stored in the data, we want to see that specific data based on what has been sent to the server and what response it's got. Once we've done that, we then want to define some users and passwords. For username, I will just put user and call it test1. So let's do just one user, test1. And for passwords, what we will do is create a list of passwords. So passwords equals, and let's do test1, test2, and test3. So let's create 4 values for the password. So test0 or test, then test1, then test2, separated by commas, and then test3. We have looked at the for loop in a previous lesson. So what we want to do is basically cycle through this username and these 4 passwords. So basically 4 attempts to log into a particular site. So for that, I'll type in for password in passwords and then put a colon here. What we want to do is then look for a connection. So attempt, and we're looking at an attempt to connect. So we type in attempt equals and connect, and here we want to put in the username and password. So user comma password, and I've noticed a couple things I just want to fix up here. So just change this to for password and put in password here. And then what we want to do is notice another spelling mistake here. So I need to fix the attempt with a T on the end here. So fix that. But really what I need to do is actually print this. So let's print and put this in brackets. Now I actually don't need attempt. So let me remove that. And let's have a look at what the names were previously. This should be called, is it connect or, let's go up and have a look at that. It is connection. So let me fix that to connection. And we also want to put in an IP address for the machine we're going to scan. And in this case, because we are scanning in a closed network, that IP address is 192.168.146.52. So basically, we're looking for this IP address and then send that username and password to basically brute force its way to see whether a connection is successful and then return the username and password. I just need to put some quotes around this to make sure the format is correct. And once that's done, I'll just go through the code to make sure that everything looks okay and fix any spelling mistakes or any errors that occurred. So let's go up and have a look at this code. So I just paused the video and made some fixes because I was writing the code as I thought of it. You'll see that there will be 4 attempts. It'll use the user test1 and then cycle through these different passwords: test1, test2, and test3. So basically 4 attempts and against this IP address. So hopefully the program works fine. And as you can see, we will then print the results to the screen to make sure that we are seeing the results, which IP address, which username, which password. So as you can see, it's a simple program basically to determine if a connection can be made via FTP. Once it is established, we're going to send the username and then basically return a new line and then send the password and then receive some data, and then finally quit, and then close that connection. So it will keep going through the cycle each time until it determines whether a connection is made and what is the username and password that will be successful. So this quick video can basically show you that if you've got 1,000 usernames or 100,000 usernames and you wanted to scan through, you could create a little program like this to basically go and test against an IP address, test all the different users, test all the different passwords, and see whether a connection can be made. Firstly, check if the port is open, and then check all the username and passwords. So in this video, we have created a very simple brute force cracking program in Python. So let's run the program and let's view the actual results. So let me go through the results with you so you can actually see how this works. So in the first attempt, it's trying this IP address with the user test1 and the password test. And the result that's shown is 530 login or password incorrect. Then it goes with test1 and password test1. Then it's trying password test2 against user test1 again. And the result is being printed because of this particular line here. It's printing the value returned by data. And if you notice in the last line, it tells us the IP address with the user test1 and password test3 has successfully logged in with this particular line. But what we can now do is filter out our results only for the successful login. To do that, we need to modify the code with an if statement. To do that, we need to change the code slightly, not so much, but just a little bit to make sure that we then determine which line has 230 listed in it. So to do that, we go to the last line in the code and remove the print word. And what we want to do is in its place, we want to type in result equals. What we're now doing is instead of printing it to the screen, we're storing this result in this variable. Now I also have if 230 is contained in result, print password found and the actual password. So if we run the program now, you will see that in the last line, it's tried all the attempts and then found the password found is test3. So as it had found 230 in the actual result, it then printed the password value for us. The information I've shared with you in this particular brute force password cracking program is strictly for information purposes only. I've used this in a controlled environment, but wanted to show you why a hacker would create their own brute force password cracking system. Why would anyone want to do that? Well, basically, if they wanted to scan thousands or 10,000s of IP addresses, they could use the first part of the program to basically scan multiple IP addresses to find which had port 21 and which ports were open. And then based only on those particular ports, run the second part of the program, which basically used a password dictionary to then scroll through and find out which users and passwords were available. So a hacker has a very great amount of flexibility with writing their own programs. And the other reason is that if a program is custom written, it's very hard for any system to flag that it's a copy of a certain program. It's basically written from scratch. It's a unique program, so may be perceived as a real valid program rather than something that is malicious, as we've shown, because this basically is allowing a hacker to scroll through a FTP site using multiple usernames and passwords to log in and test whether there is a connection. And once a connection has been made, it allows the hacker to basically access a network when they shouldn't have had access to that specific network. So in this lesson, we've looked at how to create our very own brute force password cracking program. We've looked at socket programming. We've looked at how to connect to an FTP site and then test out different usernames and passwords. Again, this is strictly for informational use only. There are huge amounts of risks if you do this on a public network. This exercise has been performed in a controlled environment and strictly for demonstration purposes only. Be very careful when creating these types of programs. This has been done in a controlled environment, but if you are trying to create this program or run this program against public websites, there are huge risks and huge fines, potential jail time if you are caught.